Will that be shaken or stirred? It doesn't really matter. We'll tell you why this week on Motoring 2002.
Formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
There is no denying the popularity of sport utilities, but despite the fact that very few are ever taken off-road, hasn't stopped car manufacturers from opening up driving schools aimed directly at their sport ute customers. Take this, for example. It's called the Jeep College, where people can learn the art of off-roading. Well, later on, this will be the backdrop to test drive as Graham Fletcher checks out the 2002 Jeep Liberty and sees how it stacks up against the competition. And also this week at the other end of the automobile spectrum, we'll check out the BMW Z8, better known as the car that James Bond drove. But you know, being here in this environment has reminded us of a story we did a few years ago that proved that long before sport utilities became trendy, there are still people who know how to enjoy the 4x4 experience. This playground is better known as the Gopher Dunes. Motorcycles, ATVs, and 4x4s are welcome here all year long. But today is the day that everybody looks forward to. It's the Good Friday Mudbog.
I suppose there's different kinds of rallies that people have where it consists of pavement and back roads like gravel roads that they might take, the odd vehicle on. These vehicles here, their sole purpose is to go out, get dirty, and get stuck. I mean, they're what they call their beaters. And basically, it's a farm community and a bunch of farm community people coming down here for a good time.
Trail number 1 and trail number 2 are for 35-inch tires and under, and that's it. Trail number 3 is for 35 and over. Guys, like I said, four-wheel drive trucks have had a bad name for a long time. We know what ruined it down in St. Williams. So let's show everybody that wasn't the truckers that ruined it. Let's put on a good show for these spectators today, and let's continue on.
The big event today is our Mudbog. It consists of probably 8 pits. 2 up at the front that we use for our Mudbog racing, and then we've got several different pits inside the bush today. Basically, we've got the course marked out, and anything in between that course is fair game today. The 4x4 market has changed, as many of the smaller trucks like the Ford Rangers and Chevy S10s and whatnot, they're like cars. Now what these guys are doing, a lot of these guys are taking vehicles like that and modifying for this kind of condition. Putting in the bigger tires, suspension lift kits, increasing the horsepower of the engine, stabilizing the drive lines. So there's a lot of work that goes into these trucks before they can actually compete in something like this.
You're not really going to go through that, are you?
Oh, we are.
Why?
Just get wet and muddy. Have fun.
Can you do it? Like, is there pressure with all these people watching you, or what?
Oh, no. We're from the swamp, man.
Well, naturally, when you promote an event, one of your major concerns is always safety. I mean, there's always the chance of something going wrong. We've prepared for it as well as what we can. We've got quite a few marshals out today. Hopefully, between the different pull vehicles that we have, and even some of the competitors themselves, that we can keep this thing totally under control. We hope. I hope.
driving here?
It's a 1978 CJ7, 35-inch Super Swamper is the only way to go, with an 8,000-pound winch on the front. Anywhere we want to go, we go. We're not any of these, what do you want to call them, guys that think they're four-wheel drivers because they drive down the street. We drive everywhere.
Beautiful. And it's made for it.
And it's made for it. It's built tough.
Go for it.
All right. See you later. See you on the other side.
Kids having fun in the mud. Some things never change. But sadly, someday they'll have to grow up. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
In 1984, Jeep launched the Cherokee, a vehicle that was going to be a trendsetter for the next 18 years until Chrysler finally pulled the plug and launched this all-new Liberty, a vehicle they're touting for its off-road prowess. But the question is, just how much of that do you really need?
The Jeep Liberty brings all the right things in its repertoire to do the off-road thing very well. The blunt nose and bob tail bring good approach and departure angles, while the elevated stance adds the needed ground clearance. Add to that a suspension design that brings a full 8 inches of travel, and life in the boonies is both sure-footed and comfortable enough that you don't need the use of a kidney belt. The high seating position also helps by delivering an excellent view of the terrain ahead, and with Jeep's legendary four-wheel drive system you complete a very pretty picture.
You know, when it comes time to go off-roading, this Liberty is as good as any Jeep that's ever gone before. On-road, however, I'm going to defer to my significant other. She reckons the Liberty's better to look at than it is to drive. Having said that, the reason is simple. When you're off-road, you need ground clearance. When you're on-road, you don't. This thing is jacked up, which brings a high center of gravity. So in other words, looking after the lumps and not the tarmac hinders this thing on-road.
On-road, all of those things conspire to hinder the Liberty's overall handling. The tall stance brings a lot of body roll, with the soft suspension allowing the movement. The net result was an interesting run through the pylons, where the knobbly tyres that work so well off-road, well, they bring a lot of noise on-road and allow understeer to become a factor fairly early in the equation. The strong point, however, is the steering. While a little firm at slow speeds, it brings very good feedback, all things considered.
With power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, air conditioning, a sunroof and heated leather seats, I'm not sure about the boonies. This thing strikes me as being more designed for the Bay Street boys. There are, however, a couple of interesting things. First of all, this centre stack is surrounded by two modules. To make a right-hand drive vehicle, you simply take the airbag and the glove box out, replace that with the column, pedals and dash, and Bob's your uncle. It saves a lot of time and cost in manufacturing. The other notable improvement is the rear seat environment. First of all, it's got plenty of room, but more importantly, the seat back is now tall enough and you have headrests in the outboard positions, as well as a 3-point belt for the center occupant. It really does make things a lot better than the old Cherokee.
As with the pylon test, the willowy suspension allows quite a lot of nosedive at the threshold. That said, the pedal is firm and easily modulated, and the anti-lock system keeps its nose out until absolutely required. The reason is that it is tuned to an off-road situation when four-wheel drive is selected. This allows some wheel lock-up on low traction surfaces, which is certainly desirable in the dirt. Power comes in two flavours, a 150 horsepower 4 or the preferred 3.7 litre V6. The latter is a derivative of the V8 that now powers the Grand Cherokee. With 210 horses and an impressive 235 pounds-feet of torque at a low 4,000 RPM, this engine brings a willing, albeit thirsty work ethic, one equally suited to on or off-road duty.
When you decide to buy yourself a Liberty, do yourself a favour and insist that the dealer install 6 locking wheel nuts. Why 6? 4 for the car, this one right here for this wheel, and 1 to hold the mount onto the vehicle. In a little more than about 30 or 40 seconds, I pinch that tyre
with nothing more than a cheap $2 wrench. This wheel nut, it shouldn't be ordinary, it should be of the locking variety.
A couple of transmissions are offered, a 5-speed manual and a slick shifting automatic. Of the two, it's the Autobots that is the better choice, especially with the V6 engine. The shifts are coordinated and the ratios well suited to the engine's torquey nature. On the safety front, the Liberty fares well. The stiff chassis, one that's 43% stiffer than the Grand Cherokee torsionally, is complemented by multi-stage front airbags and available drop-down side curtains.
You know, one of the key elements that separates a true off-roader from a pretender is a low-range gear set in the transfer case. In the case of this Jeep Liberty, it brings a 2.72 to 1 torque multiplication factor. That allows you to scamper up very steep hills with the greatest of ease and then descend them with the control using engine braking. It's a fundamental tenet of off-roading. Indeed, it's that very fact that separates this vehicle from many of the other SUVs that prefer gravel roads, leaving them mired in their own mediocrity, at least in this environment.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns dealing with seized spark plugs. It's not uncommon these days for a vehicle to come in with one or more spark plugs that simply can't be removed because they're seized. When that situation occurs, in some cases, a repair can be made to the vehicle without changing the spark plugs because the problems actually were somewhere else. The tuning or drivability issues can be addressed with new plug wires or other tuning options. However, sooner or later, when those spark plugs are worn to the point where they cause a misfire, you'll have to deal with that situation. When that crops up, what we do is enlist the services of an automotive machine shop to help us out. In many cases, we've got to use extreme force to remove the spark plug, which often results in a stripped or damaged thread. Then we've got to enlist the machine shop to insert what we call a Healy coil, which is a thread repair system. They cut a new thread in the cylinder head, insert the Healy coil, and the inside of the Healy coil is the original spark plug thread size. Then your replacement spark plug goes back in. But believe me, the best advice I can give you is to deal with this situation on a proactive basis. In other words, before the spark plug seize up, on a regular basis, change the spark plugs, use high quality plugs like rapid fire or platinum tipped spark plugs that have nickel plated shells. They're less likely to seize in the engine, and also use anti-seize compound on the threaded area of the spark plug, and in most cases that'll prevent the spark plugs from seizing up in the first place. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Morning, Q. Sorry about the leg. Skiing?
Hunting. Right, now pay attention, 007. First, your new car.
This was the scene in GoldenEye as James Bond was introduced to his new BMW Z3, which turned into a sweet relationship for both BMW and Bond. It was followed by the 750 in Tomorrow Never Dies and the Z8 in The World Is Not Enough.
Well, we got asked by MGM, so it's a good thing for us, and we never pay for any product placement. So it's all for free for BMW, really. We supply the cars for free, so that's an investment, but we never, that's a corporate policy, we never pay for product placement. Well, the James Bond, Tomorrow Never Dies, we provided 7 Series, and he drove that in the movie by means of a little mobile phone, and he had a remote control in there. In the movie itself, they shot it with somebody sitting in the back of the car, with driving it by wires, and they ran a couple of cars until he knew how to work the whole thing. And then they had a scene where it jumped from the park garage down to the Avis shop, and that took like 3 cars. For sales, that is a big deal. The Z3 is the best sold roadster in the world. The 750 is the best sold 12-cylinder in the world, and we hope that the Z8 is going to be a big shot too.
You know, long before the Hummer ever came along, the mainstay of transportation for the military in World War II was the Willys. Now, there were many derivatives of the vehicle, including the CJ or civilian Jeep that was offered to Joe Public. Well, right now you're looking at the 1950 Willys M38 owned by Brian Birkinshaw. Under the hood, a 134 cubic inch four-cylinder engine that produces a massive 60 horsepower with a top speed of 40 miles an hour. Now, we're about to head to the Quaker State Garage, and I wonder what Bill Gardner would think about this kind of technology heading into his shop today. How about it, Bill?
Well, Brad, it'd be okay, but I don't think there's a chance in heck that I'll ever see something that simple in this day and age. One of my first jobs after school was at a gas station. I remember we had a 67 Willys Jeep there that had a Buick V6 in it, and I had as much fun working on that vehicle as I did driving it. We used to use it for snow plowing and service calls, but because it was so simple and primitive, it was an easy vehicle to learn mechanics on because you could see how everything worked and nothing was in the way of getting at any one given part. Any case, we've got some email to answer this week from a viewer with a fairly primitive vehicle, and that's an 82 Honda Accord that he's having some trouble with. It's got 185,000 K on it. He says it's in good shape, but it's consuming some oil. So this answer could apply to other people with cars that are starting to consume oil as well. Now, he says that he's got some blue smoke in the exhaust when he starts it up and a little bit when it's idling sometimes. He's done a compression test. He wants to know whether just to change the valve seals in the engine or to rebuild the engine completely. Now, Peter, replacing the valve seals in the engine could quite possibly address the oil consumption situation in terms of that blue smoke that you're seeing on startup. That's often the hallmark of an engine that's got worn valve seals. When the engine's shut off, the oil runs down the valves, gets past the valve seals, enters the combustion chamber very slowly during the engine shutdown period. Then when you restart it, you see a little puff of blue smoke coming out the exhaust until you run it for a minute or two to clear it. So changing the valve seals conceivably could address that problem. However, you mentioned in your letter that when you had a compression test done, and I'm holding a compression tester here in my hand, when he had the compression test done, the difference between the dry reading and the wet reading was about 60 psi. Now, when we do a compression test, we thread this tester into the spark plug hole on each cylinder, crank the engine over with the fuel system disabled, and read the amount of compression pressure available when the engine, each time the engine passes over the compression stroke. After several cranks of the engine, we can get a stable reading for each cylinder, record it, and then see if it's up to spec. Our viewer mentioned that he had a difference of 60 psi in his compression test between dry and wet, and that seems to indicate that he's got worn piston rings and cylinder walls. But one thing I might suggest that when you're taking readings like that on a high mileage car, you'll find that in addition to a compression test, a follow up with what we call a cylinder leakage test, and I'm holding a cylinder leakage tester in my hand right now, would be helpful to pinpoint exactly where the problem is. Now, the two things that were proposed here, replacing the valve seals, fairly inexpensive job that can be done with the engine still installed in the frame of the car, might be a good starting point for our viewer because he's got some of the symptoms of valve stem leakage. However, if he's talking about rebuilding the engine, much more expensive job, engine has to come out, very costly and time-consuming job, and something that you want to look at the whole car closely before you embark on to make sure that the whole package is worth the money that you're going to invest in that one small area. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2002.
I'm surrounded here by the cream of the crop of the compact sport utility segment. Now, these are vehicles aimed at people with a youthful, active lifestyle. Well, you know, I was driving through some of the most beautiful cottage country in southern Ontario a few weeks ago, and I saw people with bicycles strapped to the back of their vehicles and canoes on the roof. Obviously, people that had a youthful, sporty, active lifestyle. And you know what kind of vehicles they were? Mostly Honda Civic sedans. So, I'm not too sure what this is all about. Now, you often see in SUV ads these things towing horse trailers. Well, my daughter owns a horse. Now, these are creatures designed to turn cash into manure. And when I go to her barn, I don't see SUVs. I don't even see pickup trucks. I see rusted out, clapped out hatchbacks because that's all these people can afford. Who can afford a $40,000 truck with chrome alloy wheels to tow a horse trailer through a muddy field? It's not going to happen. Now, the purpose of this particular exercise is to show off the new Jeep Liberty. Now, the Jeep Liberty is the first Jeep ever with independent front suspension. And the new Land Rover Freelander is the first Land Rover with independent front suspension. But wait a minute, Brittany, haven't we been told all these years that you need a live axle at the front to get the articulation that you need for off-roading and that youthful, sporty, active lifestyle? Well, the fact is that most Jeep owners and Land Rover owners, for that matter, never go off-road, at least not on purpose. So these things are designed to be driven on-road. Now, I was driving up here today. I saw a vehicle with a fabulous Sundance canoe. You know those ones that are cedar strip, polished, gorgeous thing. Now, this is obviously a person with a sporty, active lifestyle. The vehicle, it was a Windstar. So the moral of the story, if you really have a sporty, active lifestyle, you're probably going to be driving a minivan. I'm Jim Kinsey.
Well, that's it for this week. Now, we've only given you just a peek at this BMW Z8, but over the next few weeks, Graham Fletcher, of course, who has the same lifestyle and taste as the James Bond, will be getting behind the wheel of the Z8 to see if James really made the right decision. That and more as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Hummer's really the most serious off-road 4x4 in the world. So we think it's a great brand. It's got a lot of brand equity for General Motors, but we can bring some engineering and we think some innovative features like OnStar, like DVD to the Hummer brand to even make it more.
TSN's Motoring 2002 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.